the sun comes up, bright with the promise of day. Coming on high, making love with the sky, it's only a daydream away. Get up in the air, get a piece of the world way up there. Pan Am has a place of its own, a place we want to share. Everybody, get up in the air, get out and start moving somewhere. Pan Am has a place of its own. You call it the world, we call it home.
Dr. Helen Davey has been in the field of psychology for 26 years, and that's 6 years longer than she was a Pan Am flight attendant. She began flying in November of 1965 in Miami, and then transferred to San Francisco and later went to New York. And finally, when she got married, she transferred to Los Angeles and has been there ever since. She is here today to speak about what the Pan Am family means to me. So please welcome Dr. Helen Davey.
Thank you, Jane. You know, ever since I got here, I've been saying to everybody that would listen to me how scared I am. I don't do speeches, but it's so funny now that I'm up here and I'm looking around at your beautiful Pan Am faces and people I know, people I want to know, people I've just met. This is not so bad.
We're all friendly.
Yeah. One of the things that's amazing to me, though, is how you all make me feel kind of like a rock star. And, you know, this actually feels like home. So, today I want to tell you a story, my story. I'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and fasten your seatbelts. Imagine with me that this is 1946 and I am 3 years old. I'm standing in my crib surveying my world, deeply comforted by the soft sounds of the rhythmic breathing of my precious family. I'm counting my people, my mother, my father, my brother, and my sister, with the deep sense of happiness and security that they are all there. And while my memory of counting my people seems even now to be a comforting one, why was I needing to count? From an early age, I was already in the grip of anticipatory loss. So I've always been drawn to the study of emotional trauma and toward helping those who suffer from it. My history illustrates how trauma intrudes on even the most solid of families. My father was the son of John Davey, the father of tree surgery, who developed the science of saving trees around the turn of the 20th century. Following in his footsteps, my father and his brothers built the Davey Tree Expert Company, the first of its kind. My father, always the adventurer and explorer, and his first wife, Mary, traveled the entire world researching trees. My father became the world's foremost authority on the subject and was often at the forefront of the expanding new world of foreign travel. Simply put, he was one of the major world explorers of the first third of the 20th century, long before the world became so homogenized. After Mary died tragically of pneumonia in 1937, my father married my mother in 1938. She was 23 and he was 51, a difference of almost 30 years. When I was just 6 months old, my father suffered a massive heart attack that nearly killed him. The doctors predicted another one would be fatal. Our lives became centered around the fear of his death. When I was 5, I was taught to stop a car in case my father had a heart attack. It's so difficult to describe a man like my father. When I try to tell stories about his life, I'm aware that it sounds like an exaggeration. Suffice it to say that he viewed the world through a lens of great good humor. When he laughed, his face would light up with a great radiance, and his laughter was so hearty that it was contagious. Have you ever met anybody like that when they laugh, you just have to laugh too? Wherever my father was, that's where everybody wanted to be. Our bedtime stories were full of my father's real-life adventures. He went on several round-the-world trips to explore and document the world's trees. In 1922, he and Mary were on the very first world cruise by the Cunard Line to circumnavigate the globe. This is the first one since Magellan. It was accompanied by a lot of fanfare and news coverage. Harbors all over the world at that time were so primitive that it was difficult for a cruise ship to navigate. In 1928, he had the very first motorized safari from Cape Town to Cairo. He called it big tree hunting and photographed for the National Geographic. To give you a timeline here regarding Pan Am, it was 1 year later, in 1929, that one trip launched Pan Am's spectacular ascent into airline history. My father told us stories about adventures in exotic places like India, China, Japan, Burma, Australia and New Zealand, Singapore, Korea, Hong Kong, the Middle East, and Europe. Is this beginning to sound familiar to any of you? I think you can see that what I thought of as my father's world became years later our Pan Am world. And in being part of Pan Am's world, I could feel connected to my father. If I couldn't have him, then maybe I could become like him and see the things that he had seen. When my father died in 1951, when I was just 8 years old, our family life was completely shattered. None of us, including my mother, had any idea how to mourn him. We bottled up our feelings and rarely talked about him. Instead, we concentrated on somehow surviving the loss of this man who was the idealized center of our world. Upon graduation from college in 1965, I found the job that I could not have improved upon even in my most grandiose childhood fantasies. The little girl who had gone to sleep at night listening to her father's glorious travel stories with visions of foreign places dancing in my head, applied for a job as a stewardess for Pan American World Airways. From the moment I arrived on Pan Am turf, I felt like this new family was home. The atmosphere of expansive optimism and bold self-confidence reminded me of my early years when my father was alive. I was convinced that Pan Am would forever be the world's most fabulous airline and that it would never, ever die. But the grandeur of Pan Am, like that of my early family, became shattered as well. For 10 years, I'd had the best airline job in the world. But as circumstances began to change and Pan Am's decline became more evident, I unconsciously began preparing myself for its death with a strong feeling of déjà vu. I was beginning to feel like Pan Am, like my mortally ill father, was becoming unable to protect me. It took me 10 more years to finally take my leave of the company and family that I loved so much. At this same time, Pan Am employees were having to make the painful decision whether to risk staying with Pan Am or going to United. Our Pan Am family was fracturing, and half of our world was gone. So you might be asking yourself, how did she do this on a Pan Am salary? And no, I wasn't a trust fund baby. Following my divorce in 1981, I ended up owning a duplex in Los Angeles that I could live in, fix up, and sell so that I could follow my dream of becoming a psychotherapist. But during that time, often I would show up at work with cement dust on my uniform and paint in my hair. I didn't know anyone in the field of psychotherapy except my analyst, but I had always known that was what I wanted to become someday. In early 1986, I walked away from the Pan Am hangar in shock, numb with the realization that I had just handed in my Pan Am ID, my passport to the whole world, and to my Pan Am family. My sense of belonging in the world was once again profoundly shaken. The best word to describe what I was feeling at that time is that I was terrified. Deeply mourning my loss of Pan Am, I had started my master's program in clinical psychology and sat in classes marveling at how different everyone else's reality seemed from mine. For 20 years, I'd been surrounded by people with whom I had a strong identification. And after all, we even dressed alike. I began to understand that in so many ways, big and small, my lifestyle had revolved around flying. I felt that I no longer knew how to live on the ground. For example, I always cleaned my house from top to bottom before I left on a trip. That way it would be neat when I got home. But I had never developed daily habits. The idea of doing more or less the same thing at the same time every day was something I was unsure that I could master. And I was so used to turning my days and nights around that going to bed at the same time every night seemed impossible to me. I felt humiliated when a new friend of mine in school commented on my habit of wearing the same thing a few days in a row. After years of wearing a uniform and the same layover clothes, I no longer felt the prohibition against doing that. I went through a rocky 2 years, but when I began to wave at the Pan Am planes as they passed overhead, I knew that I was better. I was learning and growing in my new field, but I remained deeply concerned and anxious about the future of Pan Am. I volunteered to conduct seminars for Pan Am flight attendants in Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. I called it Fear of Not Flying, in order to encourage those who felt there was no life beyond Pan Am. But then, the unimaginable happened. On December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, and it's been called the day the heart of Pan American died. You employees who were there struggled valiantly to resuscitate the company you loved, but you were dealing with traumatic feelings that were more pervasive than I could have possibly imagined. I was beginning to feel that I just had to find a way to help. I conducted some more seminars, but I knew that I wasn't yet getting to the heart of the matter. And what I had to say felt much too superficial and ineffective. Pan Am struggled on until August of 1991, when Delta Airlines bought what was left of the once mighty airline. And many of you went through the emotionally difficult experience of interviewing with Delta. If you were accepted, you were relieved. But if you were not, That was one more trauma to have to live with. Psychological stress overwhelmed the Pan Am organization at every level, and there were reports of suicides. The Wall Street Journal stated, quote, "Such upheaval would be painful for employees at any company, but for Pan Am people, the experience has been especially traumatic because the carrier fell from such heights. Many workers report that they began to suffer severe emotional distress. The sense of loss and heartbreak at Pan Am is only amplified by the memory of what it once was." But then, the final nightmare. On December 3rd, 1991, Delta Airlines suddenly decided to pull out its promise to fund the new, smaller Pan Am 2. And all operations ceased the next morning. Buildings shut down, airplanes were brought home and parked, employees were told to go home. The final curtain came down, leaving the remaining Pan Am employees stunned and jobless overnight, orphaned by job loss. Pan American World Airways was gone forever, dead at the age of 64. It was only later that I realized that that was the same age of my father when he died. I decided then that I needed to find a way to help both my Pan Am siblings and myself. Employees were coming to me for help. I was seeing the devastation in a very close-up and personal way. As we all know, 20 years later, and continuing even now, many iconic companies are experiencing a collapse, throwing thousands of employees out of work. I have no doubt that many of these people are experiencing similar feelings of trauma. Meanwhile, I began thinking about my dissertation for my PhD, which took me many years to write. I titled it "A Psychoanalytic Exploration of the Fall of Pan American World Airways, a study of the trauma to Pan Am employees as a way to deal with my own feelings of trauma." As I conducted the interviews, these feelings emerged again and again. I wanted to be able to capture the essence of our loss and to find a way to describe the soul of Pan Am in a way that would make sense to readers who had not experienced it. We employees all felt it, didn't we? As if Pan Am had a life of its own, an organic quality, almost a living, breathing entity. If I had experienced such a profound attachment to Pan Am, what about everybody else? What in your history led you to Pan Am? And what did the company mean to you? And how could I help you? I began to study trauma more specifically. Many people define trauma as only relating to catastrophic events like Hurricane Katrina or the experiences of war. My definition is much more broad and includes anything that is experienced as extremely painful but was never understood or talked about. And for me, the concept of re-traumatization is an important one and is central to what I'm hoping to help you understand and apply to your own life. A traumatizing event like the loss of one's company is made worse for some people because it represents re-traumatization, a repetition of a childhood history of loss or pain that leaves you more vulnerable. Examples of such childhood trauma are the early death of a parent or family member, early separation from loved ones through divorce, adoption, or tragedy, alcoholism, drug addiction, mental illness in the family, or any form of abuse. Re-traumatization happens most often when there is a close replication of the original trauma, such as a loss of the way of life as one knew it, loss of a sense of safety, or loss of a sense of control. When it happens, it brings back the same old feelings, such as terror, shock, panic, or helplessness. Re-traumatization is the experience of a painful part of your life that feels like it's happening all over again. A perfect example is the way so many people responded to the attacks of 9/11. The initial shock echoed for many people old traumatic experiences, leaving them feeling once more alone and afraid in an uncertain world. In my case, when Pan Am began to fail, I returned once more to those frightening days of my childhood when my world collapsed and everything seemed so uncertain. As time went on, former employees began coming to me with issues that they had never told another living soul. Not their husbands or wives, their closest friends, and sometimes not even their therapist. These were issues that were permeated with overwhelming feelings of shame, incest, rape, sexual molestation, suicide and/or murder in the family, among other things. After I finished my dissertation, I realized, as I tried to read it objectively, that the people that I interviewed would be too easy to spot. And so I realized I could not make my dissertation available to Pan Am people. Confidentiality is so important, and I couldn't risk that. It took me 10 more years to find the perfect vehicle to reach out to Pan Amers. The Huffington Post has the most far-reaching circulation, better than the New York Times. And when I was accepted as a blogger, I began to rewrite my dissertation in an easier-to-read form. It didn't take long for Pan Amers to share it with each other, and I felt deeply relieved that my message was being heard. Now, this is not to say that I think all of you were traumatized. Obviously, that's not true. It's hard to imagine, though, that those of you who have had long airline careers have remained unscathed. My major concern is for those of you who were traumatized and don't know how to talk about it. It's also important for you to realize that you might not know very important things about your closest Pan Am friends. So now what I'm working on is making sure that those people who need to understand their traumatic reactions regarding Pan Am can have access to information about trauma. Not everyone has a computer. Another problem is that not everyone belongs to World Wings, though they should. To remedy that, I've put all my blogs into binders of about 300 pages, whose print is actually big enough to read. We're all getting a little older now, and we all need a little bit of help. You're welcome to copy all or parts of these books, and it would be great if you would add your own photographs and stories. I'd like eventually for each World Wings International chapter to have your own book. I've brought books with me, so as long as they hold out, I'd like a member from each chapter to take one with you. I'm not sure how many we have. I think it's about maybe 17. Yeah. I warn you, they're really heavy. So there, in a nutshell, is the story of my journey. I'm sure each of you has a similar one, although I doubt if you believe it. It took me many years in therapy to figure out my story. Now I can tell it to you all wrapped up in a little bow, but I couldn't do that for a long, long time. The service that World Wings International provides is a very important one. It keeps us connected and ensures that Pan Am, as the slogan goes, is gone but not forgotten. As I did when I was a child, I still count my people. I always will. And now I have the memory of all of your beautiful faces, and I'm counting you too. Thank you so much of the privilege of speaking to you today. The seatbelt sign has been turned off, and you may now feel free to move about the cabin. Thank you.